The tree can go. Okay. And over on YouTube, my mic is now on because my mic previously was off. So my mic is now on. So I hope you are hearing me if you're on the YouTube live now. Great. Take front. Exactly. Take front and make sure that the thing is in order before it is necessary that someone tells me that. Okay. Now that I'm sure my volume is going over on YouTube. Okay. Right. Now that I'm sure my volume is functioning properly over on YouTube, we can actually start with the news. What's in this story today? NATAC outlines pushback policy on jabs. NATAC is the National Trade Union Center, and they recently held a press conference. They held up a very interesting press conference, and some of the most important parts of that, well, not the most important possibly, but the most interesting to me points of that press conference, I find, were some of the times where the General Secretary had to point out to the listeners that he is moving with the ancestors and the spirits. And as long as he has the ancestor mothers and the ancestor fathers on his side, he has nothing to worry about. He doesn't need the books and the scientists necessarily. Not that he was saying they're wrong, but he is saying he has something deeper and more important and more impactful than that. And who is anyone else to say that he's wrong? I found that very interesting. While standing firm against public servants having to reveal their vaccination status come January 17th, the National Trade Union Center has drafted a policy with recommendations for working during the pandemic. The 11-page document entitled Securing Life, Livelihood and Freedom of Choice, NATAC Policy Paper on Mandatory Vaccination for Workers, quite a heading, will soon be sent to the government as the union continues to seek discussions with Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi and lobby for Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley to revoke his decision to make public service workplace a quasi-safe zone. Quasi, however you pronounce that word, to be very honest. Yes, to the person saying what? Yes, that's what he did say. During a news conference at the head office of the National Union of Government and Federated Workers Union, NUGFW, in Port of Spain yesterday, NATAC's General Secretary, Michael Anisette, said the union is recommending that if the government plans to roll out a pandemic policy of its own, a rigorous protocol for voluntary informed consent prior to vaccinating to ensure that all prospective recipients are transparently apprised must be adopted. So you must have voluntary informed consent. So you are voluntarily choosing to give your consent after they have fully informed you. That's the idea of voluntary informed consent. And the union is saying this must be adopted very clearly. It must be a rigorous protocol of such. And I'm not sure what more they may want in it, but I guess they'd say it further on. These are the other recommendations. Now, their document, I think, was pretty sizable, 15 pages or something like that. They only released a part of the document. They only let out a little bit of their recommendations. They said the most of their recommendations they're leaving so that the Attorney General, when he reads it, he would be able to see it for himself up front. So without necessarily finding out about it in the media first, they're giving that document to the Attorney General. They're only giving us a taste of what is in the document. And this is that little snippet of what they have in their recommendation document on the recommendations they have as alternatives to the government's idea to do that whole quasi-safe zone policy where it basically works out a mandatory vaccination policy. Basically, if we're being honest. Other recommendations. The public must be told what the ingredients and risks associated with the vaccines are. That first recommendation there, I have no idea how that is going to be fulfilled to everyone's liking. There have been many lists with the various ingredients to the vaccine that have come out and have been published. Really, there have been quite a few. You could just search vaccine ingredients and you'd see quite a few of them pop up, and you could see various parts of the vaccine, etc., etc. Now, obviously, if you're someone who is less trustworthy of the officials in charge of the entire vaccine business, then you wouldn't necessarily trust the lists that they give you. So you wouldn't be very sure of those ingredients. So which list are you going to necessarily believe? If Pfizer comes out with a list of ingredients and they say, take this list, would you believe that? And obviously, as someone points out, it's patented, and you won't necessarily be able to find all the ingredients. They won't necessarily be able to give you all of those ingredients and the exact quantities. The other part, as someone rightfully mentioned, who is to say you would have any idea what those ingredients are? When they give you all those ingredients and the technical names of it and the source of it and where they got it, would you be able to decipher even what that means? So I'm not sure the positive effect an ingredient list is going to have on anyone. And the risks associated with the vaccine. That's the other stipulation they have. Now, it could also be said that many of the risks associated with the vaccine have already been laid out, and that's pretty true. What I may even join in the point that some of the risks haven't been outlined clear enough, and we haven't been told honestly and openly enough the full extent of some of these risks. Now, that can be said because, for example, one of the prime examples of that is early on in this pandemic, early last year, I am on Twitter. I saw some people being removed from Twitter for mentioning that some of these shots have some strange effects on ladies' monthly cycles. People were mentioning that very early on because for most women, that's something you'd realize. You would know if something is having a negative effect or just changing your cycle. And women realized this. And many women came out saying it. And when some people tried to make it public, they were removed for spreading misinformation and disinformation. Now, 2 days ago, well, probably not 2 days ago. I think it's a little more than 2 days ago. A little while back at the start of this year, a study has come out revealing that this information is now correct. So the union has grounds to demand that. That all the negative risks, all the risks associated with the vaccine must be clearly stipulated. But there must be consequence if those risks aren't so clearly stipulated. So what is going to happen if they have a risk, for example, this risk with the monthly cycle, and they didn't mention it? They said, that doesn't exist. You're a conspiracy theorist for suggesting such a thing. You're a conspiracy theorist for suggesting such a thing. Now, I was listening to one of the doctors that worked in the mRNA field. Blessed night, Mr. J. Chris. Welcome. Welcome to all in the chat. Again, as usual, once you join the live, make sure you hit that like button, smash it to smithereens, let me know you're here, smash it up even on Instagram and on YouTube too. Hi, Conseason. However you say that over on YouTube, welcome to the live chat. And make sure to smash that like button over there too. And all the lives, well, most of the lives, and they're numbered now, we're making progress. These lives are located over on my YouTube channel, Nathan Springer. They're saved there. So if you miss something, you can go back there. And the YouTube live actually has the benefit of having some of the articles scrolling behind while I read. Nice. Maybe Mahalia says maybe they want to know the side effects. Example, certain medication will tell you don't take it if you're this planned on being pregnant, etc., etc. And that's true. Some medication will say that. Right. I was listening to one of the doctors who worked on the mRNA technology, and they were saying pretty early on they were recognizing. I hope YouTube doesn't send me off for some of this, because the information is changing and what you are allowed to say changes so regularly, you never fully know. But they were saying very early on, they were noticing that part of the nanolipid that covers the mRNA, that does the job, was actually heading straight for was having some negative effects. Well, effects on a whole on some ladies' ovaries. This was noticed pretty early on. That's why people were suggesting this since early last year. Another example, early last year, people were suggesting this looks very likely like it comes from a lab. A lot of the information, when you actually get into it and you dig a little into the microbiology of this, it seems very suspicious, very, what's the word, synthetic. It looks strange. Funny that they would censor people's experiences, good or bad, with the vax. That is very funny and very strange and very horrible too. So I think the union has a good point asking for the risks associated with the vaccine. But here's the other thing. When someone over in the United States asked for they did a freedom of information request over on the FDA to find out all the information they used to clear Pfizer's vaccine and allow it to pass their test. They did that for you. They did that for you to find out the information. And the FDA told them something like 58 years. Years it was going to take to get that. Gratefully, for 75 years, great. For everyone else, a judge struck that down. Let me see if I could pull up that article. Paramount importance. Judge orders FDA to hasten release of Pfizer vaccine documents. This was from the 7th of January, score 1 for transparency. A federal judge in Texas on Thursday ordered the Food and Drug Administration to make public the data it relied on to license Pfizer's drug. And they said the dramatically accelerated schedule that should result in the release of all information within about 8 months. Whew, that's great. That's roughly 75 years and 4 months faster than the FDA said it could take to complete a Freedom of Information Act request by a group of doctors and scientists. And that's the thing, it's a group of doctors and scientists who requested this information. The WHO indicated that it is time that Pfizer make new vaccines to treat the new variants. And they're working on it. Pfizer says within something like 3 months, they're expecting an Omicron vaccine to come out. That's great for who that's great for. The court concludes that this FOIA request is of paramount public importance, wrote U.S. District Judge Mark Pittman. Hi, Nathan. Came in late over Mr. Author Malcolm over on Instagram. Welcome, Mr. Author Malcolm. It's Author Malcolm, right? Yes. This is of paramount importance. He said the FDA didn't dispute it had an obligation to make the information public, but argued that it's short-staffed, and the short-staffed FOIA office only had the bandwidth to review and release 500 pages a month. So what the FDA over in the United States said does boost. I'm not going to read that question right now. What they said is they are short-staffed. Their FOIA office in the FDA only had 10 staff. That's what they let the court know that. This bit of their organization only has 10 members of staff. So those 10 staff members would really not be able to process all those pages. All right. But the strange thing is, here's where it went on. The office that reviews FOIA requests has just 10 employees, according to the declaration made by the FDA. But at that rate, those 10 employees would have to work non-stop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to produce the 55,000 pages a month that the court has now ordered. But as lawyers for the plaintiffs have said, they pointed out, the FDA has something like 18,062 employees on their register. Of course, they could move some employees into that FOIA request area. All of a sudden, they only have 10 in that area. That was just too convenient. You're trying to tell me you can't move any of your 18,000 other employees into this region and speed up the process? Thank goodness that some judge was out there and noticed that this doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And they made that ruling that now they have to release that somewhere in like 8 months. So we can look forward to that. So the NATOC would possibly be able to get that question answered in 8 months. We have to bear in mind that the answer to many of these questions, our government doesn't have it. Our government, in fact, some in our government might actually be less in the know than some of us here. They have to rely on finding out the information many times like many of the other people. And on the flip side of the Sinopharm vaccine, which I'll let you know I took, but on the Sinopharm vaccine, good luck finding out clear information on that, because that's in China. And China doesn't do good on that whole freedom of information business. There's no freedom of information in China. In fact, the freedom itself is limited over there. So good luck trying to find out all you want to find out the details about the Sinopharm vaccine out of China. So I think that first point that the NUGFW made is already probably mission impossible for the government. They might not be able to even work that one out. All right, let's go on to some of the other recommendations though. There should be a vaccine injury compensation fund to provide relief for all citizens who experience adverse events or injuries from taking a COVID-19 vaccine. Yes, they would like a fund set up that anyone who has adverse effects, they would be able to be compensated out of this fund. I'm not sure what the downside to that would be. Some people say that herd Sinopharm don't have enough protection. To be blunt, and I've told people this before, to be very blunt, part of the reason I wouldn't even be worried too much about the Sinopharm vaccine because it's a bit of old technology. It isn't that strange. There isn't much strange things to figure out about it. But to be very blunt, if I had to risk some new shot that I'm worried about versus risking that it isn't as effective at stopping the virus, well, I might risk the efficacy of it because, as we know, the virus has something like a 99% survival rate. So generally speaking, unless you have those comorbidities or you are older, you aren't hugely at risk. And then in that case, that Sinopharm, even with the limited protection, would still give you quite a bit of protection. So I don't see that as a problem. J. Chris, you're speaking my language kind of there. So I am not sure what the downside of the fund would be that they're suggesting, but some people said they're afraid that people would use this fund. But obviously, it would be difficult to abuse the fund because in order to get something from the fund, I'm supposing you'd have to get a doctor's statement. They're not going to just take your word on it. You're not just going to run up in the fund and say, hey, I've been adversely affected, give me money. And I don't think that's how the fund would work. There should be a stringent protocol of the reporting of adverse events and injuries supported by a functional vaccine adverse reporting system which the public can access online and should be audited by an independent third-party vaccine monitoring board. And they also asked that the National Safe Zone Initiative should be abolished because their view is the safe zone is not safe. And many people are getting the virus from in the safe zone and they're carrying it outside of the safe zone and they're spreading the virus as per usual. And I've seen some very interesting numbers recently. Now, these numbers aren't yet verified. These are very early numbers coming out from the cutting edge of the science community. And some things are suggesting that there are some very, very strange things with the Omicron variant. There are some strange things. Things that don't seem to line up, seeming like the Omicron is a direct descendant of the previous virus strains. The Omicron is mutated way more than any of the previous strains, and when you trace the mutations, there seems to be some. But again, I am not the official scientist on this, and there seems to be some strange things with it, so we'd see how that all goes. But yes, part of the strange things, interesting, you really are interesting, aren't you? Part of the strange things occurring with Omicron, they're seeing Omicron some of the numbers, I'm saying seem here, some of the numbers seem to suggest that there's nearly an inversion in ease of becoming infected. Many vaccinated people are becoming infected extremely easy with the Omicron strain. And there are some numbers that are suggesting that the vaccine now provides basically no protection from getting it. And some of the suggestion I'm just saying this as a suggestion out on the fringes. Some of the suggestions seems like even some may be getting it easier. And some, again, out on the fringe, these are some theories that some suggest. This isn't reality necessarily. Some suggest, good night, sir, blessings to you too, unknown boy. Some suggest that it may be a possibility that some people were trying to work around with Omicron to find out a cure or another kind of vaccine, and something may have escaped a lab or be released from a lab. Anyway, right, that was down that rabbit hole. But the safe zone, according to NATOC, is not safe. But we had a response to that. There was a response to that claim that the safe zone is not safe. The response came from none other than Dr. Avery Hines himself, the technical director of the Epidemiology Division in our Ministry of Health. Hines' response to unsafe safe zone claim. Epidemiologist Dr. Avery Hines declared on Wednesday that there is no scientific justification or any other justification for the government to shut down safe zones. Hines was responding to a question about the call by the National Trade Union Center. This is what he said. There's no logical or scientific basis on which to claim that the measures to reduce risk during public interaction would be conversely increasing the risk of transmission. What you would see is if the measures aren't adhered to, if people trying to find loopholes to escape the various requirements, that these would increase the risk. But we're going to hope that those aren't in the majority, and to re-emphasize that all of the requirements for the operation of a safe zone are basically added layers of protection to reduce the risk of an infected individual being in a gathering space in the public, while trying to allow for some measure of economic activity and social activity in the midst of the pandemic. Now, the first statement I'd get into there is where he said, basically, there isn't an increased risk by the policies. If there's an increased risk, the increased risk is based upon human behavior not taking the policies seriously in those safe zones. Now, here's this. I said this in, I can't remember which contemplation, some one of the previous contemplations. If you have a policy and the general human nature shows you that people aren't obeying that policy, do we attempt to change human nature or do we change the policy? So you cannot say that if the policy works perfectly, it would work. You have to look at how the policy works in the current realistic situations. That's how governments make decisions. You don't make decisions based upon a utopian thinking. You don't think, what would happen if this functions perfectly? That's not what you do. You have to run it in a real life scenario. You have to run it with the off chance of people doing something adverse. So, for example, in a perfect scenario, the policy should be that no bar, no restaurant, no liming place, no club should suggest to anyone that they shouldn't wear expensive jewelry. Why is that a suggestion when you go into certain places? You should be able to wear your expensive jewelry anywhere. There shouldn't be a policy that advises you against wearing that jewelry. But reality will let us know that if you wear that jewelry into certain places, reality is not everyone would obey the law, and some people would go snatching that right off of your neck and maybe killing you for it too. So the policy then, if you're creating a policy, this is an example, if you're creating a policy around that, the policy has to be based upon human nature. Your policy cannot be based upon your perfect scenario of how it should work. So the statement that these are measures to reduce the spread and the problem is in people and people going against the measures, that cannot be an excuse. The reasoning has to fit in with the reality of the situation. That's the way it has to function. And if it doesn't function in reality, then it doesn't function, because we live in reality. And this is part of the problem sometimes when you have academics do. This isn't a criticism directed at Dr. Avery Hines necessarily. This is on a tangential point. This is the problem sometimes when you have academics doing some of these things. If you went to university, If you went to university, you would know that many things that you'd study in school are done in sample thought. You're thinking this out in a perfect scenario, and it's a model of what should happen. This is a model, and if you do it like this, this is what might happen. Listen, I did sciences. Sciences are supposed to be way more precise, and even up till university, what they tell you is supposed to happen in some of those experiments do not happen. And here's a secret, especially back in secondary school, some of those results that we wrote in the lab book, we had to imagine them, because it doesn't always work like that in the real life scenario. That's just the facts of the situation. When you try to bring this across to real life, it doesn't work. That's why we don't just leave our political rules, our political class. Utopian models apply to dystopian societies. Exactly. Well put. We don't just leave our ruling class to be just all the smartest people in society. We go get all the PhDs and all the professors, and we tell them make the rules and make sure everyone lives up to it. No, we get some people that we hope are pragmatic leaders, that we hope can understand the plight of everyday citizens and know that the perfect sometimes is in opposition to the good. You're trying to get the perfect, and in trying to get the perfect, things are running haywire, while you could get the good and run things on good. So that could be a partial argument. And in the defense he used there, I do not see it as necessarily standing up to the criticisms of the safe zone, at least that part of his defense. He noted that any restriction or requirements that are put in place to reduce the risk of COVID positive individuals interacting cannot lead to an increase. So the science behind that doesn't really make a lot of sense. This is what he said. He noted any restrictions or requirements. That is a political statement. I am sorry, Dr. Hines, but that isn't a scientific statement. What do you mean, any restrictions or requirements? How does that work? Anything that the government puts into place and says, this is here to reduce the risk of COVID positive individuals interacting, then that means automatically it's impossible that it leads to an increase. That does not make sense. That is not scientific. That isn't backed up by any kind of evidence. And many of the restrictions and requirements that were put in place before were noted to not be as successful as they've been said. For example, a restriction that was put in place, locking people down indoors while the virus spreads indoors. Some people suggested that lockdown indoors and forbidding people from going to gyms and going to play in parks, locking the parks, locking down the open areas, and locking people indoors where 85% of the spread is inside homes indoors, that could have very well increased the spread. And that was a measure, that was a restriction put in place to decrease the spread. So the statement that anything put in place to decrease the spread cannot possibly increase it is false. And then here's this other part. Part of the restrictions that were put in place was part of the lockdowns. And those lockdowns that closed down the parks and the gyms, etc. I'm pulling up an article here. If you're over on YouTube, you'd see the article. It's from WebMD. It's a study that came out a little while ago, but it's interesting. Child obesity rose sharply during pandemic. Childhood obesity was a worrisome issue before the pandemic, and now it's alarmingly worse, new data shows. A US CDC study found a profound increase in weight gain for kids that is substantial and alarming. Dr. Alison Goodman, one of the study's authors, told the Associated Press. Childhood obesity blew up over the pandemic. Now, many people say the pandemic caused childhood obesity to increase. And that could be said as a step-by-step process. But the pandemic is a few steps away. The direct cause of the obesity, yes, it was big people obesity too. There was actually a study that I saw. I'm not bringing it up because, well, I didn't bring it up because I couldn't find it back quickly enough to get the sure information, but the information was showing a breakdown according to generations, and millennials had a scary level of increase in obesity. It was scary for millennials. So everyone had a scary level of increase in obesity. Right. And people were saying that it's the pandemic that caused the increase in obesity. And that's, after a while, a trickle-down effect. But the direct cause wasn't the pandemic. The pandemic, the direct virus caused death, and people who got it might have actually lost some weight. What caused the obesity, the weight gain, was the lockdown and the closure of outside activities. Now, those would have been done because of the pandemic. I'm not arguing that. I'm not negating that. But that measure that was done by the authorities to decrease the risk of the pandemic actually worked to increase the risk of one of the chief comorbidities of COVID-19. So if COVID-19 still exists in the next couple of years, we now have increased obesity across the entirety of our society. So yeah, they're vaccinated. We're fighting to get more people vaccinated. But also, the same measures are increasing the level of obesity in the society. So to say that the measures cannot have any kind of negative relation here is wrong. And these kinds of statements, yeah, I'm sweating a bit here. And these kinds of statements, I think, are some of the statements that decrease some of the trust in these officials. When you make a carte blanche statement like that, let me read it again. He noted, any restrictions or requirements that are put in place to reduce the risk of COVID positive individuals interacting cannot lead to an increase. What is that? I don't agree with that statement. I'm sorry, Dr. Hines. It's not a nuanced enough statement for a scientist. That's a statement for a politician. Leave that statement for good old Terry to say. Leave that statement for Dr. Rowley to say. They are politicians. You are a scientist. You can speak on the science and the exact evidence nature of science. That's what you speak on. Can you categorically describe your ethnicity without being prejudiced, please? Nathan burning calories while talking fitness. My ethnicity? That's without being prejudiced. Yeah, I don't even know if I can. I don't know all that's mixed up inside of me. There's a lot mixed up in there. There's Spanish, there's Irish, there's of course African. I don't know all. So I guess I'd have to do what's the 23andMe or Ancestry or whatever those things are. I heard those guys be collecting your genetic information too and selling it off to the highest bidder. So careful if you're sending your genetic information out to them. What about an increase in depression? I'm sure there's a correlation with immune responses. Yes, there is an increase in depression. There is also a ballooning in suicide rates. And all of these things are knock-on effects from restrictions done for the virus. And this isn't necessarily me saying that, is it just me or is the live sticking? I don't know. This isn't necessarily saying that all of those restrictions, all of those measures were bad ideas and we should not have done them. But to make it seem like none of these ideas have any possibility of any kind of negative effect, I don't agree with that at all. He went on, I would think as a country we're happy that people are being employed in safe zones. I think as a country we're happy that we are finding a way to live with the virus to coexist. All right, where did he go on? All right, the health minister also was asked to comment on the people because Andrew Solom, okay, I didn't know he passed, rest in peace if that's true. If you're spamming my chat with false information, I'll be very disappointed. I hope not. The Minister of Health was asked about the individuals who came out in the NATOC press conference. There were some people who came out in the NATOC press conference, and they came out as witnesses saying that they have personally experienced negative side effects after taking this shot. To be very honest too, I've had some people tell me this. I've had some healthcare officials tell me that there are lots of cases of adverse effects that are not reported. This is what I have heard. This is hearsay. This cannot be put in court. I've heard that from people. The minister was asked about it. He was asked if if it's legitimate or if it's a subtle way of promoting a no vaccine agenda. This is what the minister said. First of all, if it is genuine, we express our concerns, but we have no way of knowing because no medical evidence was put forward. There was no doctor certificate, there was no medical evidence put forward, and that is complicating the conversation, unfortunately. He's right. What I think of the Special Operations Response Team sort, I don't know. I don't know what to think of them. I don't think of them very often. Good night, Sea Sky Nature. Once you're in the chat, I know a gift is bound to come. Sea Sky Nature is my gift giver. So, where do you get these gifts from? Not that I mind. Give on. All right. And the health minister is right, though. He's right. There was no direct evidence given. There was no doctor's certificate shown. So there was no sure way to know that these people were negatively affected by the vaccine. That wasn't known. That wasn't proven. I'm not sure if they could have proven it in that scenario. Anyway, he said he's hoping that the unconfirmed reports of causation were similar to the causation attempted to be made with 2 earlier deaths. What we would appreciate is the medical evidence that demonstrate or that make a causal link. He noted that just because 2 things happen close to each other, which is correlation, does not necessarily mean causation. Now, you know I am smiling at him making this statement. Do you know I am smiling? Here on Instagram, good night, Sea Sky Nature over there on Instagram too. I'm smiling because this is the precise argument people make against the way that our country has admitted we are checking our COVID deaths. Wow, you're a very kind person, Sea Sky Nature. Thank you very much. The way we are calculating our COVID deaths in Trinidad includes the correlated COVID deaths too. Someone could die of something else, and if they are also tested positive for COVID-19, they are listed as a COVID death. So now, why can't someone who is critical of the shot say the same thing about the shot? Anyone who dies after having gotten the shot within close time, we can list them as a vaccine death. Can we? No, we can't. Because correlation does not mean causation. So, I think, do you think the press conference is being staged? They are not asking hard questions about COVID and the restrictions. No, I don't think the press conference is being staged. I think our journalists are just of a certain nature, and that's how they ask questions. I've seen a former journalist over on Facebook. She was lamenting about that. She was complaining that there are so many very good questions that can be asked pointed questions, and to me the real crux of the questions, the best part of these questions, are in the follow-up to the questions. You ask a question, you get their answer, and then you ask a follow-up question to see where their answer fits in with the reality of what you're trying to find out. That's where you find out. And a lot of the times we just have no follow-up question. I haven't even looked at some of these news conferences in a while. The questions don't give you much more answers. Moderator, I'm on all platforms, even YouTube. Welcome, Sea Sky Nature. Thank you. So, yes, we cannot check vaccine deaths like that. Correlation does not mean causation. We do have at the Ministry of Health and have had for decades a reporting system to report adverse events brought about by vaccination and immunization. It is not new. What is new is the public interest in it, for which I am happy about. There are 3 pathways to which we trace these events. Part 1 is something called e-savvy, events supposedly attributable to vaccines or immunization. We also have another pathway. This is coincidental events and adverse events of special interest, AESI. Now, I found this suspicious that he brought this up. I was very interested to see, okay, we have basically a system for reporting these adverse events. I went to find it. I don't think there's public access to these events. And here's the thing, Minister of Health. If you go back to the request made from the union, let me read that over again. The union asked that there be a stringent protocol of reporting adverse events and injuries by a functional being key here. It needs to be functioning by a functional vaccine adverse reporting system. Here's the other stipulation, which the public can access online. We cannot access it. At least I don't know where to access it. The minister didn't even tell us when he told us, yes, we do have a reporting system. Haha, we caught you here. It's only that you're now interested in it. He told us that, but he didn't tell us where to find it. We are interested in it now. How do we find those results? How do we give those results? Who gives up the suggestions of these adverse effects? And to be very honest, I am not in the typical sense of anti-vax, but I could understand some people's query and suggestion that they don't think all adverse events have been reported and tabulated and calculated. I am telling you again, this is hearsay. I'm going to repeat it. Tobago stepped up with more info on the COVID reports. I hope that Tobago does some positive changes and we see that they rise better with this, because I think they have a higher likelihood of doing that. Tobago has a lookup on that. Just asking if correlation isn't causation, why all these things are suddenly happening to persons. All right. Part of this, there's a part of it that works with you just paying attention to. If you ever, I don't know how many of you ever noticed this. If someone you know, someone close to you, or you yourself, you're looking at buying a car and you want to buy, let's say you want to buy an Aqua. You're looking for one of those tiny cars. You want to buy an Aqua. And you were looking for a royal blue Aqua. You want a specific color, royal blue. You would notice all of a sudden, you start to notice all of the royal blue Aquas all over the highway, all over the roads. So sometimes it could just be a matter of you paying attention more and noticing more. So that's why anecdotal evidence doesn't necessarily work. Anecdotal evidence just tells you one thing that happened. And that could just be a random occurrence. And even if you have a compilation of anecdotes, somebody said, I've heard this quote somewhere, a compilation of anecdotes does not make statistics. So even if you have many anecdotes, you still don't necessarily have statistical proof. So that's why you need somewhere where you can report all of these things. And even if the reports, you're welcome. And even if the reports can be suggested that some of these reports are misleading, well, at least we would be able to verify these reports and be able to look deeper into some of them. So I think we need to have someone looking into creating this VAERS system, this vaccine adverse event reporting system, and allowing people to access it online. The message I've kept saying on most of these vaccine-related topics and this pandemic-related topic, keep giving the people information. Give the people information. As much information as you can. I think the more information you give, the less it seems like you have something to hide, the more people can trust you. And especially noting the fact that this pandemic doesn't seem like it's planning to go anywhere anytime soon, you need trust of the people to make further decisions. There are more decisions that may be necessary to be made further down the line. And if you lost all the trust now, what are you going to do further down the line? Give the people the information. I don't know. First off, I don't know that they're hiding the adverse effects. I cannot say that. Makes it difficult to believe everything they say. It seems anecdotal until you hear that Pfizer was asking for 50 years. 75 years they were asking for actually. Yeah, we spoke about that, Shiny Douglas. You could go back on the YouTube live and you'd be able to refresh some of that. It was in the very beginning, so you could just take back in the beginning of the live and you'd hear some of that again. All right, let's switch gears now. There was another bit of news coming from our Attorney General. Our Attorney General is someone who knows how to keep himself in the news. He's regularly in the news. He keeps himself there. And there was a bill that recently passed. The bill was, I believe the bill had something to do with revenge sharing of exposed pictures or videos or content in general. Revenge pornography. Yeah, work hours have me reaching late. That is no scene. Yeah. There was a recent bill passed to make sure that people, especially women, because they are the ones who fall victim to this most, have a legal way to get something done when they have this done to them. That bill passed. And the Attorney General went on to lament about a previous bill that had some of these same things in it that he wanted to pass also. And that bill did not pass, and he was lamenting about it and about the state of the crime detection rate in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's get into it. Let's get into exactly what he spoke about there. Attorney General, sex crime detection, shame, laments non-passage of Cybercrime Bill 2017. Of 2,282 sexual offenses reported in Trinidad and Tobago in the past 5 years, 647 were detected at a detection rate of 28.3%. The Attorney General said. He delivered these statistics as he lamented the Parliament's failure to pass the Cybercrime Bill 2017. That would have addressed some digital-based offenses such as voyeurism, revenge porn, and capturing and sharing of images of a personal nature without consent. The Attorney General was piloting in the Senate the second reading of the Sexual Offences Amendment Number 3 Bill 2021, which he called complicated, and said government was putting out a suggestion on policy. With the failure to pass of the cybercrime legislation, Al-Rawi said some means for mitigating crimes of such a nature was now being attempted through this new bill. The figures given by the Attorney General was a previous report. All right. So the Attorney General is basically saying that because the opposition, he went on to blame some on the opposition, because the opposition, he said this numerous times as he spoke about this, because the opposition didn't allow the passage of this Cybercrime 2017 bill. Do you feel like all this forced vaccination thing is all about scoring political points? No, I don't think forcing vaccinations is about scoring political points, because I don't think there are political points to be scored by forcing people to become vaccinated. So no, I don't think so. Right, he lamented over and over and over. Why did they not pass this bill in 2017? And I started trying to remember this bill, and to me, I remember that this bill had some complicated history with it. So I went to look back on it again, because I like information, and I'm curious like that. And I found that bill again, and I find it, personally, I found it dishonest when he was doing it back then, and I find it now to be dishonest. To try to pass this Cybercrime Bill 2017 and use as an excuse the gendered violence and the gendered victimization of online sharing of revenge porn, etc. And say that this bill was the only way this could have been done, and because we didn't get this bill passed, that's why these other things didn't happen. But look, you got it done in a new bill, so you didn't actually need the cybercrime bill to get these things passed. And there were several other things attached onto the cybercrime bill that had nothing to do with gendered violence and releasing people's nudes. Let's take a refresher. Going back to an article from May 22nd, 2017 from Loop. 10 things to know about the Cybercrime Bill. Government announced its intention to reintroduce the Cybercrime Bill 2015. This is old news. This is back in 2017 in Parliament that year, causing concern. There are several things, especially the media fraternity had several problems with this bill. Here are 10 things about the Cybercrime Bill that might affect the sharing of information online. And now, 2017 was a lot different than now. This cybercrime bill would have an even greater effect when you look at these laws. If this cybercrime bill had passed back then, the effects it would have had now, especially I was seeing late last night, right around the close of the live, about some of the bacchanal going on TikTok. This bill would have had some impact even on that. Even on me talking here, this bill would have had an impact on. All right. Here are 10 things you need to know. 10 things you needed to know about that cybercrime bill according to Loop. There's $1 million fine and 3 years imprisonment for copying data. Section 8 of that bill says any person who intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification copies computer data to any computer data storage device or to a different location within the computer system, or moves computer data to a computer storage device or a different location within the computer system, if found guilty, could be sentenced to 5 years imprisonment or a $2 million fine. Now, here's the thing with this. Here's how that works against journalists. A lot of journalism has to do with you finding information from people that they didn't want found. No, that would be considered copying it. If you copy any data that you didn't have permission to copy, you can go to jail. Bear in mind, the bill didn't pass. I'm glad it didn't pass. But our Attorney General, our present Attorney General, is saying that he's angry that this bill didn't pass. And because this bill didn't pass is why so many young ladies are suffering at the hands of nefarious men who are trying to abuse them online. That's what our Attorney General is saying. That because now we cannot charge people for copying information, that's why these young ladies are suffering. All right, here are some further things on that. The Media Association went in on their problems with that. Number 2, accessing computer data without a lawful excuse. Under Section 9, any person who intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification acquires computer data without the consent of the owner, whether for personal use or use by another person, may be subjected to a fine of $100,000 or 2 years imprisonment on conviction. So, if you acquire computer data without the consent of the owner, all you have to do is acquire computer data. Thanks for that reminder. Let's not start the man is trash in the chat yet. I think we could have a day to do that man is trash or man is not trash or woman is trash, and we could, you know what? There's a point I want to make coming down closer to the end of this point, but we'd get into that. Those, you know, the thing self man sweating like a fast. Well, politicians are very good at being deceitful. The bill has nothing to do with porn. Exactly. J. Chris is making a good point there. This sounds like this sounds like he could make it through UE. Copy and paste was life. Copying data, computer data. If you don't have permission, all you need to do is not have permission, and you could be in jail. Number 3, jail time for sharing information, even if you didn't know. Section 13(1) of the bill says accessing information without lawful excuse or justification is a criminal offense, even if you didn't know it was shared unlawfully. A person who is not authorized to receive or have access to computer data commits an offense if he intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification receives or gains access to the computer data from another person, whether or not he knows that the other person obtained the computer data through authorized or unauthorized means. So, I get my information, I copy it, I go on someone WhatsApp, take a screenshot or something, or take a picture of their phone, and I send you that picture. And all of a sudden, you could make a jail because you got information. You didn't even know how I got the information. All you do is you got the information yourself. Now, this might have even created, so now your data have to come with a chain of custody. Now, this might have created some problems even with social media, because let's say I shared something online that I got through an unauthorized means, and then you took what I shared, for example, on TikTok. So let's say I did a contemplation, and in my contemplation I included a picture that I got from somewhere else, and you took my nice TikTok and you shared it. All of a sudden, you are partner to a crime. you are partner to a crime. Now, bear in mind, in 2017, social media still wasn't like how it is now. So some of this couldn't have even been foreseen in that way. But I am glad this bill didn't get through. The journalists back then were some of the main ones really upset about this. But the position many of us find ourselves in now, in the current setup of the internet and social media, all of us would have been breaking a lot of these rules. A lot of us would have been breaking a lot of these rules. Number 4, no protection for whistleblowers. Whistleblowers may be criminalized for emailing journalists under the Cybercrime Bill. Section 13 states a person who intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification initiates the transmission of multiple electronic mail messages from or through a computer system or uses a computer system to relay or transmit multiple electronic mail messages with the intent to deceive or mislead a user or internet service provider as to the origin of the message could be subject to prosecution. Whistleblowers would be the kind, you find out something wrong is going on in this company or in this institution, and you're there inside, and you're on the inside, and you say, wow, I can't let this happen. My conscience, I cannot sleep at night knowing this is happening inside of this company, inside of this institution, inside of this organization. I need to let someone know something. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to reach out to Mark Bassant and try and get my story shared out there. I want an investigative journalist, and I'm going to become a whistleblower. Now, even doing that could end you up like Snowden or like Julian Assange and end you up in jail for doing the right thing. And yes, I find it very suspicious that Mr. Al-Rawi is still so intent on wanting to pass this bill. Now, there were parts in the bill that did include things about people who like to interfere with little children. They included things about revenge porn. There was an interesting part here, and this is where TikTok might be interested. Number 7, cyberbullies will be punished. Section 20 of the bill seeks to criminalize the act of cyberbullying or causing fear, intimidation, humiliation, distress, or other harm to another person or detriment to another person's health, emotional well-being, self-esteem, or reputation. Anyone found guilty of cyberbullying by threatening to publish private information which can cause public ridicule, contempt, hatred, or embarrassment faces up to 5 years imprisonment or $1 million fine if found guilty. Listen, anything could be considered as causing fear, intimidation, humiliation, distress, or harm to any person. Listen, any contemplation, when I make a contemplation and I talk about the Attorney General getting, well, him and his family getting paid up to 20 million, according to the articles in the newspapers, getting paid up to 20 million in rent by our government while sitting in government. If I said this, he could sue me and tell me I caused distress on him and his family. That's nonsense. He could have called me a cyberbully just for talking about the news. Where's the whole TikTok game gone? Well, all around the world, there are laws to protect whistleblowers in Trinidad. Now, to be fair, this bill did not pass. You could, if you want to thank someone, you could thank the UNC for that. For those who may not be necessarily UNC fans, find it in your heart and thank the UNC members for this. She who would be in a cell next to me. So, girl was, you're looking to get me in trouble here. TNT jail have all that space. Nathan, you're asking what I transporting is cyberbullying. Exactly. I asking you last night if you are transporter because you are Rasta man driving. And I still find it suspect. You go in quite low euros to Matlat. I let it know. I still find it suspicious. But me asking that question could have been considered as insulting or as harassment. And I could have been facing a jail sentence. Number 8, police can search your computer and or confiscate data. Under Section 23(1), authorities can issue a search warrant for the search and seizure of computer data once there are reasonable grounds the material was acquired in offense of the act. So if the police And we know how our police, we know how our esteemed TTPS function in Trinidad and Tobago. Listen, if you're an officer and you're in the live, I'm not necessarily directing it at you, but we know, you would know if you're an officer and you're in the live, you would know how some of your own fellow officers operate in Trinidad and Tobago. So, all the officers would have needed was reasonable grounds that the material you acquired illegally. Listen, nearly anything on my phone could be assumed to have been acquired from someone illegally. It's very easy. And then all they need is reasonable grounds for that. And they can take my phone and search through all of my data. Here's the second part. It says also that officers can also retain and copy data, remove data, and the computer from its location. Going on, number 9, corporate bodies are also liable. Under section 22, where a body corporate commits an offense under the Act, and the court, the director, manager, secretary, or other similar officer of the body corporate, or any person who purports to act in such capacity, either connived in or consented to the commission of the offense, the company could get it. So if your secretary, your director, or manager does their own nonsense, you as the entire company could have fallen out of that. Wow. Tough. That's tough. And number 10, according to the Loop article, is prevention from even speaking on matters during criminal proceedings. Under section 28, once computer data is being used during criminal proceedings and confidentiality must be maintained, a person who is the subject of the order cannot, without lawful excuse or justification, disclose the fact that the order or notice has been made or the details of the order or notice. Now, watch how that works out against journalism. If you're a journalist, and you acquired some information and they have reasonable suspicion, they run in and start to acquire your data. You can't even write the story on the data you acquired. You can't even write a story on the fact that you are being investigated for the data you acquired. If you write even anything about it, you are now guilty of another offense. What were they trying to do? The amount of power that put in the hands of the government was insane. I think they had specific targets in mind. I wouldn't doubt it. Now, I know I may be harping on about this, but I found this very interesting, and especially the fact that the Attorney General keeps bringing this up. He brought it up again in 2019, and in 2019 when he brought it up, he again blamed journalists for not supporting this bill, and because they didn't support this bill, they caused gender violence to continue. And I find it so, I'd use the word disgusting, to use something as sensitive and as explosive, as easy to get people emotional as something like gendered violence, and use that to promote a bill that isn't ostensibly about gendered violence. The bill isn't, for the most part, about anything to do with that. The bill has to do with a whole lot more. Now, here's where I found even another article. As I said, I'd be harping on a little about this. Wired 868. Back in 2017, one Dr. Emir Crown, let me read his qualifications. He's a senior lecturer at Mona and a barrister. He is Dr. Emir Crown. Let me read those letters. BA, LLB, LLM, LLM, PhD, LEC. All the letters in the alphabet. He wrote an article condemning many of the parts of this law also. Let me see if I could get into some specifics so we don't have to go through the entire thing. First, the bill itself states that it is inconsistent with sections 4 and 5 of the Constitution. So, people who were thanking the UNC, this is why you could thank the UNC. Because the bill itself was unconstitutional. in certain parts. It goes against some of the rights stipulated in our Constitution. So in order to do that, you need a 3/5 majority. They needed a special majority to pass the bill because it went against some parts of our Constitution. That's the first part. That's the first part scary in this bill. Second, the bill sets out several offenses, sections 5 to 19, but offers little in the way of defenses or exemptions. And the defenses or exemptions, the lawyer here, the doctor, the lecturer, is speaking about particularly journalists and the problem journalists would face in this. Now, I would extrapolate that to include many other members of the social media ecosystem now in this present time. And if that law was proclaimed back then, or if it's proclaimed now, it would affect way more than just the journalists. He went on to speak about the section 8, where it speaks about a person who intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification receives or gains access to a computer data knowing the same has been stolen. Some have suggested that this would in effect criminalize investigative journalism. That's partially true. All right, I'm looking for some more parts of this here. Third, and with the greatest of respect, several provisions simply, this is what the barrister is saying here. I have the same beard and mustache length. Ha. Well done, sir. This is what the barrister is saying here. Several provisions in the bill simply don't make sense. For instance, section 6 states, bear in mind the loop article didn't go through the entirety of this bill. This article goes through some more insanity in the same bill. All this is in the same bill. All this is in the same bill that the Attorney General is still trying to get passed and is still trying to tag on to something about gendered violence and sharing people's nudes online to get it passed. For instance, section 6 states a person who intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification remains logged into a computer or part of a computer system or continues to use a computer system commits an offense. Undoubtedly, the provision is intended to cover situations where persons use a computer system after someone else has logged into it, like a computer terminal in a university or even an ATM. But the provision itself does not say that. Therefore, by logging into my laptop and typing this review, I have evidently committed a cyber crime. And that's the thing. This bill would have gone out there and criminalized so many actions. Yes, rant from Rantland. This bill would have gone out there and criminalized so many different actions. And many of the actions are very vague in how you express it. How could you have in our law books that it's a criminal offense for a person to intentionally and without lawful excuse remain logged into a computer system or part of a computer system? What do you mean? If I remain logged in, I'm committing an offense? You have to get better than that. And what it may be is some people without the computer expertise were trying to write the laws. That could be part of the reason. Another section he quoted, subsection 12.1, also very awkwardly drafted. It states that a person who, through authorized or unauthorized means, obtains or accesses computer data which is commercially sensitive or a trade secret, relates to the national security of the state, or is stored on a computer system and is protected against unauthorized access. I could already predict what he's going to say. I could have already predicted what he was going to say there. Indeed, it would seem like in this section, the section basically makes it a crime if you do not have the authority to, and you gain unauthorized access to secret information. How could you gain unauthorized access to secret information in a random computer? The offense isn't the access to secret information by an unauthorized person. Where did he go on? There was more he went on to speak about. You know what? the article is there. I think eventually I'd try to post some of the links to some of these articles for you to go through it if you're so interested. A lot of these articles get pretty in-depth and they go through quite a bit of the legal jargon. It's left vague so they can interpret it to their benefit. It isn't for the benefit of the public. I agree. And that's why I find it so scary. When something is left so vague, it's up to the interpretation of the enforcer. I believe the last live or the live before I was speaking about this, about so many of our laws in Trinidad that seem so vague that the enforcer has all the authority. They're basically the law because the law says they have the choice to determine whether you're breaking the law or not. It doesn't add up. Now, the bill that speaks about releasing people's sensitive nudes online, I agree that should be a crime. There's no debate about that to me. And the fact is, that leans more towards a specific gender. But here's a question. If we're talking about releasing sensitive data, the idea of it is you shouldn't release anything I send to you that I don't want you to show to other people. That's the principle behind it. We agree on that, right? The principle behind it is if I show you something, if I send you something that I consider private, you should not be able to show other people it. And that's the principle why revenge porn in and of itself is wrong. Although the person willingly sent it to you, you cannot then show other people because they didn't give you the permission to show other people. Okay. And by the way, that did pass. So if you were thinking about getting involved in such reprehensible behavior, you would make a jail. You would go to jail. And it would be good for you. But in such a case, here's my question. Do you think that it would be fair to include in this screenshots of private conversations? If I spoke to someone in confidence, I spoke a private matter to you. I told you, but my expectation was of privacy in this situation. And in the very same bill, they spoke about someone who has an expectation of privacy. And if my expectation when I speak to this person is of privacy, can they then screenshot that and throw it up in the girls group chat to make kicks on me and throw it up on a WhatsApp status to say, look at this fella, how he thirsty, or whatever they like to do with it? Could that now be done? Or shouldn't that also likewise be a criminal offense? Because you're sharing something private that the person shared with you that they expected to remain private. I find. Now, I know to some this would sound very funny, but I honestly, I find sharing people's private conversations, screenshots of private conversations, even if those conversations are with you, if someone had an expectation of privacy in that situation, I think you shouldn't be able to share that also. Just as you shouldn't be able to share someone's private pictures that they shared to you having an expectation of privacy, likewise should be about conversation. Okay, but what will happen if this data goes into the wrong hands? What if the government database is hacked? I suppose you're talking about if the government acquires your data. Well, tough. If the government database is hacked. Oh, that was another part of this entire thing. I remember that from reading it. Part of the bill also included that it gives the police permission to use remote surveillance or evidence gathering technique. Basically, they could get a warrant without your knowledge to hack into your phone. Their plan was to give them the kind of NSA in the United States authority where if they have some reasonable suspicion that you're doing something, they could hack into your phone to find out. That's rubbish. I don't like that. I'm glad the bill never passed. I can shake the UNC's hand for making sure that bill didn't pass. Thank you very much, UNC, for saving our lives not our lives, but saving our online privacy in this case. I appreciate it. I appreciate our opposition here. They did the job that I would have wanted them to do. Thank you, United National Congress. Thank you very much. They can already hack into your phone and locate it here in Trinidad. Locating your phone is different from accessing your data. She can post the convo and tag he girl, he can sushi. All of that. Now, even in that situation, someone was speaking about the possibility where she can post the convo and tag you again. So somebody is suggesting, all right, you're in your side business. You're having your little side business going on here. And you know how some of those events goes. You're talking, the side is fed up of being the side. The side takes a screenshot, posts it, and tags the main in it. You should be able to sue them. And I agree. I think so. Because think of it this way. In a female side, let's say the female has her side thing going on also. And in the female's perspective, she sends, I'm drawing it here. She sends a picture to the side. Can the side then post that picture and tag her main in it? Would that be fair? Would you be okay with that? If you send a picture to the side guy and he takes a screenshot of that, posts it up and tags the main guy, would that be okay in that case? And if it wouldn't be okay in that case because you had an expectation of privacy even from the side guy and even away from your main guy, then shouldn't that expectation be likewise for the person? That I'm asking if we don't want some logical consistency in this. Although it's an unspoken contract that certain things remain private, unfortunately, when you share something, especially into the internet, it's out of your hands. Nothing is safe on the internet. Well, that's true. And even in the case of, although there is a law now, don't get yourself tied up. Don't go sending random people your pictures out there. Even though there's a law, good luck on getting someone to be prosecuted by that, because you'd have to prove it in the first place. What if it's a random person tracking you? You can't expose them. And that was between me anyhow. I mean, well, if it's a random person, because it's built on the expectation of privacy. If it's a random person randomly popping up in your random chat, they don't have an expectation of privacy. But if me and you in an ongoing, what's sneaky link? That's the word now, eh? Sneaky link. Right. You and I in an ongoing sneaky link. The expectation of privacy is actually paramount in that case. The expectation of privacy in that circumstance, I think, is actually more than in the average circumstance. So, I think to be an entanglement, to be logically consistent, even the screenshots of private chats need to be included. That's my opinion. I'm pretty sure that's not in the law. The final news article I'm going to talk about for the night, I found very interesting. Now, when I spoke about the protest on the Beetham, I heard I saw someone in one of the comments on one of the websites was saying that they don't have a problem with the protest and they understand it. But when you inconvenience other people, there's where the problem is. Now, here's the problem with that. A protest that inconveniences no one isn't an effective protest. If I sit down in my room and I'm saying that I am going to be whispering to the corner that I'm very angry that they haven't paved my room, haven't paved our roads yet. I'm very angry they haven't paved our roads. I'm very angry they haven't paved our roads. I'm really, really angry they haven't paved our roads. And I say that's a protest. What does that do? I'm protesting, yes, great, well done, great protest. He's protesting for better roads. But nobody cares because it doesn't affect anyone. So, to be fair to the Beetham residents, to have an effective protest, it has to inconvenience some people. And the reality of the matter is, the greater the inconvenience, oftentimes the the more effective the message is in getting across in the protest. Now, there's a limit to that. When protests begin to become violent, when protests get violent, there was some studies done since in 2020 when we had the whole BLM uprisings. There were numerous studies done since way back in the 60s that show you the reaction when things get violent. The problem is violence. From the time you make a protest and it gets violent, the public loses interest in, well, they don't lose interest, but they lose positive viewing of you. If you have a protest and you don't get violent, you just voice your grievances, then very often the grander the protest, the more you're able to voice those grievances. So for example, because the residents in Betham blocked the roads, they got everyone to see, but they didn't go any further than that. They didn't get in any physical confrontation with the police. They didn't pelt anyone's vehicles there. They just stood at the side, made videos, and spoke about what they were interested in. Listen, I found that to be a very, very effective protest. And the residents of Betham are basically saying the same thing. Empress Rooney, you nearly make me choke on my coffee with that one. I'm not even going to read that. Let me just make sure I flip that bit onto the YouTube screen so it's saved there for posterity, Miss Empress Rooney, so that anyone looking over these lives can find this back. Good night, Christopher. Super welcome, although you're late. The last article of the night. All right. Betham activists, no coincidence in immediate WASA repairs. Community activist Kareem Marcel does not believe it is a coincidence that WASA will resume repair works on a Betham sewer line the same week the water and sewage residents protested. Scores of Betham residents blocked the highway with burning debris on Monday in protest of an apparent lull in a WASA project in the community. The residents complained that the massive sewer leak has been flooding their homes. When we flush our homes, at times the sewer water coming through our bathroom floor and our sinks. Agreed. According to Marcel, communication with residents could have gone a long way. I found, you see this little paragraph, I found this man to be what he said here, to be so well put. In your opinion, what do you think will happen if that protest turned violent like 1990? If that protest turned violent, they would have been arrested, their message would have been lost. The people who, even like me, who now I would not recommend burning things on the highway, but who like me would be sympathetic to their cause. If that protest got violent, I wouldn't have been sympathetic likewise. All right. According to Marcel, communication with residents could have gone a long way. We know the cylinders were specially ordered, and of course, it would not have happened in one day. But I don't think it's any coincidence. Because of the protests, we got a press release from WASA telling us why the job was paused, when it is due to resume, and when it's due to be completed. Also, we would not have seen with such haste and urgency that these cylinders would have been delivered the very same day, he stated. The lack of communication seems to be not only WASA's problem, but generally a governmental problem, because had it not been for that protest, the residents would not have been made aware as to why there was a pause in the work, and we would not have known when would have been the intended resumption of work, and when would have been the expected completion of work. So after the protest, all of a sudden, WASA refound their communication department, and they issued a release telling them when it's going to resume, when is the planned stop time, why it was paused in the first place. So why you couldn't tell the people this all the time? That's what the community is saying. Some communication is necessary, and that's part of my lament over and over in Trinidad and Tobago. Communication doesn't seem to go that far, and I think to go back to the point I almost always harp, I think some of that trickles down from the colonial days, where colonial governments had no interest in communicating with them former slaves and all that, and the indentured workers. We don't need to communicate with you. This is run by us up here and the colonial power over in England, the crown. And then our own government that took over from them afterwards seemed to have some of that same view, where we don't need to communicate everything that happens here. We govern these people. No, what should be happening here is you aren't elevated above us. We're all on the same level. So you're managing something on our behalf, and we would like to know the details of how this is managed. That seems so simple to me. Sometimes the state and its organizations are to blame. If they acted in time, it may not have had to escalate to a protest. I agree. And the resident seems to be suggesting that also. He suggests that part of the problem was communication. If WASA could have shown that they sent out a release telling these residents the work is going to resume on Friday. The reason we have paused is we didn't get the cylinders yet. The cylinders would be delivered on Monday afternoon. We plan to complete this project by the end of the next 2 months. If they said that and they had proof of that release, then the actions by the residents would make no sense and people could rightfully condemn the actions. But if there was no communication and now all of a sudden you're doing the right thing, now I could say that the residents may have done the right thing, at least in their view. They would not have gotten communication otherwise. So in order to get communication, they need to burn the highway. That's the lesson we are teaching to our Beetham residents, to the Beetham community. What we are telling them is if you really want good communication, if you really want good service out there in the Beetham, you need to burn the highway. I think that doesn't make sense. It's setting up the country for negativity. It just doesn't work. All right. The stream is nearly an hour and a half over on YouTube. We had a good long time today. We started pretty early too, so we're doing well. Transparency is an ongoing problem. It's promised every election by every party and no one delivers. Here's the thing with transparency too. We're hoping that the people that benefit the most from the way the system is currently set up, we're out here hoping those same beneficiaries are going to see it in the kindness in their heart to change the system to not allow them to benefit so much. That's quite a hope. All right. Later's over to YouTube. Closing there. Thank you for turning up. Click that like button and you can go over there and view the remainder. Well, not the remainder. The beginning of the live and all the other lives. This has been the 16th live thus far. We are now on Mindful Live number 16 and we're going strong. So over on YouTube, thanks for tuning in. See you again